Welcome. It is a sad day. Yesterday would have been David's 60th birthday. We come here today as we deal with our shock, our grief, the pain of loss, and the love that we had for David and that he had for everyone in his life. And so we begin with the chanting of the 121st Psalm, these words that speak of lifting our eyes to the mountains, these mountains that David knew, that he conquered, that he loved.
Shir lamalot, esayna el harim, me'ayin yavo Ezri. Ezri, mehim Adonai, oseh shamayim v'aretz. Oiten lamor raglecha, al yanum shomrecha. Hine lo yanum velo yishon, shomer Adonai shomrecha, Adonai tzilcha yad yaminecha. Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka, ve'yareach balayla. Adonai shmorcha mikol ra. Yishmor et nafshecha, Adonai yishmor tzedcha uvoecha, me'ata ve'ad olam. Psalm 121. I lift my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way, and your protector will not slumber. See, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Adonai is your guardian, your protection at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. And Adonai will guard your soul, your going and your coming, now and forever.
Death has taken our beloved David freed. Our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence, there is lamentation. In the tears that have been shed, there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, and be with them. For David's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever. For his companionship that we shared along life's path and which continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of his heart and the gifts of his mind that brought us joy and happiness, for his embrace, for the many F-bombs that we have heard from his mouth, and we will probably hear again this morning. For all these and more, we give our thanks to God. And in this time of grief, we listen to the voice of our sacred scripture that brings us the ever new message of God's nearness, that tells of our kinship with the Creator, in light as in darkness, in joy as in sorrow, in life as in death. You know, I was looking at texts and I thought about the 15th Psalm, which really could have been written for David Fried. The psalmist writes, Adonai, who may abide in your house, who may dwell in your holy mountain? Those who are upright, who do justly, who speak the truth within their hearts, who do not slander others or wrong them or bring shame upon them, who scorn the lawless, but honor those who revere God, who give their word, and come what may, do not retract, who do not exploit others, who never take bribes. Those who live in this way shall never be shaken. And perhaps more than any of the Psalms, the 23rd Psalm has brought so much comfort to so many over the ages. Cantor Sachs is going to chant it, and I'll read it in English. And I ask that you join with me. You should have the text in front of you in the English. And if not, even if you know it, or bits and pieces of it, join with me after it is chanted in the Hebrew.
Adonai roi lo echsar binot asher yorbitzeni al mei menuchot al mei menuchot Yanodi Nafshi Yeshovev Yeshovev Yanchani v'maglei tzedek Yanchani v'maglei tzedek Lamon Shemo Gam ki Eilech Begit Salmavet Lo irora Ki ata imadi Shiftecha umishantecha Heima Yenachamuni Taroch lefanai, lefanai, shulchan neged sorerai, dishanta v'shemen roshi, kosi revaya. Ach tov v'chesed yudefuni kol yemei chayai, kol yemei chayai, v'shovti b'vir Adonai leyorech yami. Adonai Adonai roi lo echsor.
Together. God is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. In his sorrow, Job cried out, Adonai natan v'Adonai lakachi, Shem Adonai mevorach. God has given, God has taken away. Blessed be the name of God. An ancient people, we are well acquainted with grief in the valley of shadows. Death and sorrow are not strangers to us. And yet the centuries have taught us that the Keter Shem Tov, the crown of a good name, endures beyond the grave, and that there is strength in faith. And so with Job, we say, Adonai Natan. God, you've given. You gave us David Fried, who will not be forgotten. And for all that was good and enduring in his life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. Adonai lakach, and God, you have taken away. We pray for the strength to turn our broken hearts into an altar of trust, before which we acknowledge your sovereignty and love. As we now say, Yishem Adonai mevorach, me'ata v'ad olam, blessed be the name of God now and forever. And finally, in the book of Ecclesiastes, in chapter 3, we find Lakol zman va'et lechol chefetz tachat hashamayim. For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down, a time to build up, a time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to grieve, and a time to dance. A time to throw stones, a time to gather stones, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time for tearing, a time for sowing, a time for silence, a time for speaking. And now is both a time for silence and a time for speaking. Now is a time to hold on to memories, to joyous, amazing, happy occasions. Now is a time to hold on to laughter and deals and love. And now is also a time for silence, to remember a remarkable human being, unlike anyone I think any of us have ever met. And so we take a few moments now of silent prayer as we remember David, as we remember his love, his life, and his legacy. We pray in silence. The family asked that we sing this song that he loves so much. She packed my bags last night, pre-flight, 0 hour, 9 a.m. I'm gonna be high as a kite by then. I miss the earth so much, I miss my wife. It's lonely out in space. On such a timeless flight.
And I think it's gonna be a long, long time till touchdown brings me round again to find I'm not the man I think I am at home.
Oh, no, no, no.
I'm a rocket man, burning out his fuse up here alone.
Mars ain't the kind of place to raise your kids. In fact, it's cold as hell. And there's no one here to raise them if you dare. And all this science I don't understand. It's just my job 5 days a week. Rocket man, a rocket man. And I think it's gonna be a long, long time
till touchdown brings me round again to find I'm not the man I think I am at home.
Oh, no, 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 no.
I'm a rocket man, burning out his fuse up here alone.
And I think it's gonna be a long, long time. And I think it's gonna be a long, long time
till touchdown brings me round again to find I'm not the man I think I am at home.
Oh, no, 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 no.
I'm a rocket man, burning out his fuse up here alone.
Rocket man,
burning up his fuse out here alone. And I think it's gonna be a long, long time.
A lot of people wanted to talk about David. And I think every person here in this sanctuary has a different story that you can tell. Some are appropriate to tell from the Bema, and others are not. Scott Levin is a dear friend of David, and Scott unfortunately cannot be here this morning, but he is watching, along with so many of you who are joining us online. And Scott sent me the following words that he asked that I read. He writes, "Dearest Molly, Danny, Nate, and Tyler, I'm sorry that I couldn't be with you in person on this mournful day. As you know, COVID has caused me to quarantine in New York City. And I'm glad that technology is allowing me to watch the service from afar. I have known David a very long time. We started our relationship nearly 4 decades ago, just after David went from selling pots and pans and perhaps some other things, from the trunk of his car to being a retail leasing agent. Honestly, David was good for my legal business. In the 1980s, we had a recession. David would put tenants in Tiffany Plaza Shopping Center, give them 3 months free rent, and by the 5th month, I was there to evict them. Like so many of us that have known David, we measure just how long by the kind of phone, or more accurately, phones he was carrying at that time. I met David when he was carrying 2 Motorola brick phones. For those of you that don't remember what phones looked like before your iPhones and Androids, the Motorola brick phone was literally the size of a brick. It was not unusual to see David with 1 phone in each ear, and on occasion he'd hold the 2 phones together so that the 2 people he was talking to could speak with each other. Of course, David went from those days to being one of the top commercial brokers in the state. And there are a lot of secrets to David's success, but I want to mention 2. First, and Scott, these aren't secrets, I'm sorry. First, he was tenacious. Once he got his teeth into something, he just never let go. Second, David was the ultimate concierge. He was always available to his clients and the people that called his number off signs. And as a friend, it took some amount of patience to be out for a nice meal. And in the middle of a sentence, he would take a call. Thank goodness we had Molly, who could pick up the conversation while David finished his call. And the ultimate concierge that he was extended beyond taking calls at all hours. If you were a friend or even a friend of a friend, he would literally do anything for you. The amount of time that he spent giving advice to people, whether they were a client or not, having a special bottle in his bar just for you, and taking people to concerts, trips, and sporting events, all without a clear expectation of payment, was incredible. When I asked him about it, he made it clear that he believed that when you do nice things for people, it all works out in the end. David knew how to entertain, whether it was Friday afternoons by the swimming pool with our long-lost friends or his summer bashes. You were in for a treat. The food was great. The music was rocking. I even recall the first time I saw the porta potties he brought in, ones with a flower vase that smelled nice. Of course, the best party he ever threw was the one for Danny and Nate's wedding at Henry Roth's house. Henry was truly David's brother from another mother. The place was gorgeous, and the Freeds and Sturgis family were beautiful, and the fact that David received his diagnosis just days after he put John Travolta to shame dancing in Saturday Night Fever with his beloved daughter was remarkable. I can watch the video of David and Danny dancing over and over again, and often do. If attitude alone was enough to save someone's life, David would have beat cancer. Unfortunately, as I know all too well, that's not the way it works. Good people often die too soon. Still, I thought that if anyone could survive such an awful prognosis, it was David. After all, I had seen him often bend reality to meet his clients' needs. He was never intimidated by people saying something could not be done. I am so very sorry that he could not bend reality to his own needs in this instance. Molly, Tyler, Danny, Nate, David will be missed. But with a life that was so large, I know he will not be forgotten. Much love and strength to you all. And I want to call upon, in this order, Dr. Henry Roth, and then Robert Hudgens, and then Tyler and Danny to share some thoughts. Henry?
Good morning. I am Henry Roth. I'm a friend and neighbor of David, Molly, Danny, Tyler, and Nate. Be patient with me. I've never done anything quite like this before. Molly, you're amazing, and you were amazing. You loved and fought for your man like no other. Despite his rantings and sometimes even rage. Oh, okay. It's just reverberating in here. Even rage, you were at his side every inch of the way. I love you. Everyone here loves you. Molly, Danny, Tyler, Nate, I am so sorry for your loss. For the last 2 decades, David was my best friend. I was one of many best friends for David Freed. I thought I was a high-energy, super social person, and then I met David. David was a charismatic, gregarious, and engaging man. Wherever he would go, he would seek out, engage, connect, and then maintain lifelong relationships. I was one of innumerable such encounters. Charlotte and I moved into our new home in Greenwood Village in March of 2001. 3 weeks later, we hosted a Greenwood Hills Homeowners Association meeting. David walked up to me, put out his right hand, and said, "Hi, I'm David Freed." Immediately, ordinary for David when he meets someone, he invited me to come over and hang out that evening in his garage. I understood when I was first in his garage. That night I did, and that is how this bromance began. David was truly my little brother. It was like having a little bad brother who fought all of my battles and then later did well. In fact, if he were actually my little brother, my parents might have been a little happier and easier on me. David then called me almost every night to come over, often just the two of us sitting in his garage, and often an endless stream of other guys coming and going. David's garage was a meeting place. Immaculate cars, parked on carpet, neat and tidy, air conditioning, lounge chairs in the middle, television and coolers, always fully stocked. This was David's garage mahal. David himself was a meeting place. Everywhere he would go, there was a crowd of people who knew David. After that, we spoke every day. David spoke to a lot of people every day. David included me and invited me to everything and introduced me to everyone he knew. Concerts, sporting events, parties, everything in his house, chilling with more people than I can count. And then, of course, vice versa. David invited me into his whole life and invited himself into mine. From that point forward, I just tagged along. David would say things like, "Just follow me, let me do all the talking." Dave wanted everything to be his way, and that usually worked out pretty well. David was unique. I'm sure that everyone here today can safely say they never knew anybody like David Freed. Excuse me. Endless energy, endless drive, determined and defiant. He loved his family, he loved his friends, and he was especially happy with himself. David was amazed by his own success. David had a long-range plan and expected excellence from himself and everyone around him, not always easy for those closest. No one could possibly speak to as many people in a day as David, and no one could possibly have as many things going on at once. There is a saying, if you want something done right away, give it to a busy man. That man was David Freed. To that I would add, if you want something done right, ask David. One night about 15 years ago, I was with my family going to an Avalanche game. We were just talking in the car about how connected David was with everyone in town. We were laughing about him. We were trying to find a space in a parking lot across from the stadium. None were available. An attendant came over to move me along. As a joke, I rolled down the window and said, "David Freed told me I could park here." The attendant, his name is Ariel, said, "Oh, you know David Freed? I love David." And parked my car. Of course, no charge. I could go on and on. A lot has happened in 20 years, but there's no time for everything. So I'm going to jump right to 2021. Right now, it's all I can think about. 2021 turned out to be a pretty epic year for the Freed family, the Roth family, and all of us here today. The year started with wedding bells. On a chairlifted veil, Danny and Nate shared their plan with me to be married. Delightfully, I offered my home, inside or out. Of course, that was before David got involved. Danny and Nate's initial estimate was, about 150 people. This eventually became David and Molly sending out 550 invitations. Danny and Nate got married, but this was David's wedding. David marshaled every resource necessary to put on the greatest show. Per David's instruction, I spent my spring and summer getting my house ready and my property together. Almost everything was free to Dave, including me. Fortunately, in the end, there were only 350 guests and about 50 in staff. It was a perfect evening. The next morning, the very next morning, David points to the top of his abdomen and tells me he's feeling a little discomfort. Pain? No. Burning? No. Perhaps pressure. I said, "You're just having a little indigestion." David said, "I don't get indigestion." I said, "You are the poster child for indigestion." David said, "I give people indigestion." But I don't have it. David was right. I put David on Prilosec for 1 week. There was no response. He then saw his real doctor, Ian Levinson, who then doubled the dose for a week, but still no response. Not okay. If not indigestion, then what? He is 59 years old. We decided that David had to have an endoscopy to see what was going on inside his stomach, or so I thought. We could not get that scheduled, so instead on Friday, September 3rd, 2021, David had his first of many abdominal CAT scans. They never improved. That scan revealed a golf ball size portocaval lymph node, for which I knew there could be no good explanation. An MRI was recommended. That was scheduled on Rosh Hashanah last year, Tuesday, September 7th. The night before, David asked me if I would go to the MRI with him. That seemed silly. But sure enough, I was on I-25 coming from a meeting in Boulder, so continued down to Dry Creek Road where the MRI was being performed. I had instructed David not to leave without the disc of the MRI study. I walked in just as the study was completed and David was in the waiting room. He immediately asked me to wait for the disc while he went out to look for a property. While there, I got to look at this MRI with 2 radiologists. It was pointed out to me that the lymph node was most likely cancerous, and there was a lesion in David's gallbladder that did not look benign. Wow, I sat there, tears rolling down my cheeks. I then went straight over to see David and Molly. I didn't have to say anything. We talked about the findings, but they had to run out to a Rosh Hashanah dinner. That was impressive. Amazingly, the official MRI reading that came back 2 hours later missed the tumor and missed the lymph node. I guess David was right in wanting me to be there. It felt good to be useful. It took another 2 weeks to get David's gallbladder removed and to get a tissue diagnosis of cancer of the gallbladder. And that is how it all started. David's A-team, as he described us, being Ian Levinson and me, insisted that he go to MD Anderson Cancer Institute in Houston, Texas, where I was already a patient. We had an appointment to see a famous gastrointestinal surgeon. David was eager and optimistic. We were excited about who this guy was. That did not last. The surgeon, a big guy, walked in, introduced himself, sat down, and looked at images on the monitor. He read a couple of reports and turned to David and said, "Well, you're not going to be my patient. I do not operate on persons who cannot be saved. You're not operable. You need palliative care." I could not believe my ears. David, perhaps not fully understanding what was just said, explains to the surgeon that he's not like other patients that he has seen, and he can handle and beat anything, and specifically asks the surgeon, "What are my chances for surviving this?" And the surgeon went like this. The surgeon left the room. David and I embraced and cried. The next day we saw an oncologist, Dr. Javely, who was much more upbeat, had a treatment plan, and left us believing there may be a long road ahead. A few weeks later, I went to a spa in northern Baja called Rancho La Puerta. I was there to decompress from things going on in David's life as well as my own, eat well and exercise. The first night, I sat across the dinner table from a woman named Edie Littlefield. She was talking about her experience with doctors and cancer. She had 63 chemotherapy infusions and 6 surgeries, and she had survived. I asked, "What was your primary?" She answered, "Gallbladder cancer." A lady next to me, who I had already talked to, said, "Beshert." That night, I read Edie's book, The Mission Walker. She was at this retreat as a regular, giving talks on overcoming obstacles and positivity. Her book was about refusing to die and bending the medical arena to save her life. Could this be David Fried? 48 hours later, David and Molly were on the phone with Edie. Now, of course, Edie could not change the final outcome, but she definitely changed the experience for the Fried family. She and David became kindred spirits. Molly, David, and Edie communicated frequently. She made it so that they could believe, and believe they did. Edie would have been here for David's birthday party this Sunday, but of course, we canceled. Unfortunately, David's clinical course went according to script. No different than I had first read. David did not survive 1 year. Knowing David as you might expect, David was not a typical cancer patient. He was a cancer gladiator. Like everything else, he was determined to rise to the challenge and beat this. He would call on everyone he knew, to call on everyone they knew, to find a solution. After all, isn't that what David did for you? Before it was over, 5 heads of gastrointestinal oncology had contributed to David's treatments. Unfortunately, David's cancer did not care. At no point was there any response to treatment. Every assessment and evaluation was a letdown. David and Molly never gave up and would not stop fighting. Even at death's door, they openly greeted another chemotherapy trial. David's last treatment was on July 11th. They did not concede defeat until the very day we lost David. I liken David to the dying soldier who keeps fighting to the bitter end, taking as many of the enemy with him as he can. This past Saturday night, David told me not to worry, that he was going to keep doing his thing and that he wasn't going anywhere. He died 48 hours later. Now you might think, David lost his battle with cancer. He did not. David beat cancer. He beat cancer by the way he lived his life and loved his family and friends. He beat cancer by always being there for everyone. He packed 100 years of life into the 60 years he lived. He beat cancer by the way he handled it and lived the last year of his life. He never stopped entertaining. 20 weekends, there were sleepover guests in Florida. Everyone went on boat rides. David rode everyone around Fort Lauderdale in his Golf Jeep. Dinner reservations every night. He did not slow down. He continued to work several large business deals and expected over $1 million in commissions this year. He was very proud. He packed his entire retirement into 5 months. Since meeting David, my life divides into before David and after David. Our families and friends merged. We provided each other constant counsel, a lot of laughing, a lot of crying. I share with many people in this room that no matter what problem I was having or what I needed, David had a plan or David had a guy. I only hope I can remember how to fend for myself. Sadly, now our lives are reordered into before David, during David, and now truly after David. I'm really going to miss this guy. That was beautiful, Henry.
My name's Robert Hudgens, and first and foremost, like most people in here, David Freed was my friend for the last 26 years. It seems like a long time ago, but there are many people here today that have known him for over 40 years. There's people here that just met him last week, last month, and last year. That's the impact he made on everybody. And anybody that has been to one of his parties, we all know they were small, intimate affairs with 500 of his closest friends. Molly's an angel because my wife wouldn't have it. She'd cut me off at 16 because we don't have enough plates or matching silverware. David was a street smart guy, or as he liked to say, a Matchbox University graduate, referring to the college degree you used to be able to order off the back of a matchbook. This was well before the WWW, as he liked to call it. I'm also a Matchbox University graduate with a minor GED that I received when I was 16, and I told my parents to F you, got a job in an apartment. Maybe this is why we clicked. Maybe he saw something inside me that reminded him of him. 15 and a half years ago, when I was looking for a career change and talking with David, as many of you have done, he asked me what I wanted to do. And I said, I want to do what you do. And without skipping a beat, he said he would give me a shot and promptly set me up in an interview with Mr. Greg Morris. I tell you, I must have filled that interview in the most horrible of ways, because Greg quickly called David and said, I'm just not feeling it. Maybe it was my Matchbox degree, or it could have been I was just simply clueless on who Fuller Real Estate was, is, and everything about the profession. When David called me to convey the news, he said, I got bad news and good news. What would you like first? as I was feeling my heart sink, I said, "Give me the bad." And he told me Greg did not want to hire me and said that I was simply not a Fuller guy. He must have heard my heart breaking over the phone and quickly said, "The good news is I was able to convince him. You will be my guy until you can show him that you're a Fuller guy." And this is how I was enrolled in the David Freed School of Real Estate. There are other students that have enrolled in this school here today. Some dropped out quickly, and others stayed a couple of years or more. But I was determined to prove to everyone I could be that Fuller guy. So I rolled up my sleeves, and 15 years later, I'd like to think I have received a PhD in the David Freed School of Real Estate. Although there are some people in educational institutions that do not recognize my doctorate. However, most of you know and are surprised anybody could stay long enough to even graduate with a bachelor's degree, let alone a master's or a PhD. David not only gave me an education in commercial real estate, but all facets of the business world and in life. There are many of you today that graduated from all sorts of prestigious and storied institutions. But the education I earned simply cannot be taught at a university. And I often find myself feeling like Jack in the movie Titanic. Everybody knows the scene. He's eating dinner with all the first-class passengers with Rose, and he says, "Now I'm here with all you fine folks." David was a believer in people, and we all know he was a hard ass. But David loved the underdog, and it didn't matter if it was a landlord, tenant, your parents, brother, sister, friend, or a friend of a friend. He would roll up his sleeves and be your hard ass. Defend or help you with any, and I mean any problem this world can dish out. I also know just about everyone here today and those watching online has a story at some point in time when he was your very own street baller, guidance counselor, construction manager, life coach, investment advisor, car dealer, wheeler dealer, matchmaker, career advisor, money manager, and accountant. There is nothing he enjoyed more than helping all of us and telling us the right way to do something. He treated every problem like it was his own, and it simply was who he was. He always knew a guy or knew what to do. And on the very rare occasion that he didn't know, he would call that guy he knew and figure it out. So as we gather here today, tomorrow, or the next day, please share time with those around you when David was there for you. Thank you, Daddy-O.
David Freed, my father, was one of a kind. Many of you know the story of my relationship with my dad over the years, but very few of you know how it ended. My father made it a point from the day I was born to bring me to everything he could and introduce me to every person he crossed paths with. And as you look around this room, that was a lot of people. I remember my father bringing me to dinners with clients so that I could meet and learn from the many people he looked up to throughout life. He wanted me to adopt the things he loved in each person and learn how to determine my own judge of character, to which he was so good at. At a young age, he would even have me sit and listen to phone calls about deals he was working on, just so I could hear him tell some motherfucker to shove it up their ass. He was so proud of these moments. I learned so much from just watching the way he conducted business, friendships, and his family. I could sit here and tell all of you how tumultuous our relationship was at times, but I'm pretty sure you've already heard the stories from him. The reason I am standing up here today is to tell you the story that most of you don't know. A month ago, on June 18th, Father's Day, my dad and I sat down after dinner and had a conversation that would forever change our relationship. My father looked me in the eyes and asked me to come work with him. The second I heard him say those words, it was a done deal. In perfect David Fried fashion, he told me my working hours were going to start the next day from 9:30 a.m. until 6 p.m. But we all know that meant 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Over the next few weeks, we built a list of duties that grew every day, yet our relationship grew with it. I would spend each day rubbing his feet and learning the many lessons that David had saved for me. It was the crash course of life that we both wish we had more time to dive into. He shared important wisdom with me that he swore he had never shared with anyone. I feel honored to be the son of David Fried and carry his legacy forward in my own life. He had said he was so grateful for the time we were spending together and wanted me to pass his knowledge along to the future generations of our family. It was like I had reconnected with my best friend I hadn't seen in 10 years. On July 18th, exactly 1 month after he changed my life, my dad passed. I am so sad that I won't be able to spend more time with my best friend. But Dad, I can't wait to make you proud by carrying on your legacy.
When our dad was first diagnosed with cancer, I made a point to text him every day just to say, hi, and I love you. And he would always text back, I love you more, which consequently would lead to the argument of me saying, I love you most, and then we would just kind of fight about that and battle it out for a while. But I have to say, I would usually give in and just let him win. Okay, Dad, you love me most. Loyalty. Yeah, that word, right? That word to me is what encompassed David Fried. When we were speaking to Rabbi Black a few days ago about how to describe Dad, words like fixer and mentor came up too, but ultimately all of these words stem from someone who is really, truly loyal. Every single person in this room is here now because of how much loyalty meant to my dad and how much he appreciated the loyalty that you all showed him. But his loyalty to his family was unmatched. I'm sure all of you know I was David's little princess. He would drop everything for me. Oh, sorry about that, guys. 1 second here. Hey, you got a quickie? Or can I call you right back? Okay, great. All right, sorry about that. Just a quick story about my dad. At my senior prom after party, I was really less than enthused to be there and was looking for any excuse to go home without seeming like a total loser. So I went to the bathroom and told my dad about the dilemma, to which he responded to go back out to the party, answer his phone call in 5 minutes, and make sure to put it on speaker. Well, when I answered on speaker, I was greeted to a loud, "Danielle Sarah Freed, I'm coming to pick you up right now. You didn't clean your fucking room." He showed up, snagged me from the party, and drove me to a different after party. Loyalty, yeah. The loyalty he showed his family and friends is one I hope you can all continue in his memory. That's the legacy he would have wanted to leave. And Dad, I love you most. I win.
Dear Molly, dear Danny and Nate, dear Tyler, dear Liz, dear Fafi, Mishpachtaich, dear family and friends all. In the Mishnah, this is one of the central books of Jewish law, Tractate Avot, chapter 4, verse 13, we find the following. Rabbi Shimon Omer, so shak tarim hem keter Torah v'cheter kahuna v'cheter malchut v'cheter shem tov ula al gabeihan. Rabbi Shimon said there are 3 crowns in the world. The crown of Torah, the crown of priesthood, but the crown of a good name exceeds them all. David Freed was an extraordinary man. As we all know, he was intense. He was tenacious and tireless. He was persistent. He was relentless in everything that he did, from the way that he lived to the way that he loved. He was tough. He was brutally honest. He was salty in his language, in his relationships, and he loved with an intensity that was sometimes overwhelming. And Danny, as you said so beautifully, loyalty was everything to your dad. He cherished, valued, and demanded loyalty from everyone in his life, and he treated everyone who was loyal to him with grace, with generosity, and with love. He was at the same time intuitive and childlike. He was a mentor to many and a menace to those who tried to take advantage of him, and he was unlike anyone I have ever met. I only met David a few months ago, but as you said so beautifully, it felt like I've known him all his life. Molly, at the advice of my dear friend and her, Scott Levin, reached out to me and shared that her husband needed some spiritual guidance and that he faced the most difficult challenge of his life. She said, "My husband has never lost any battle that he has confronted. He is a fighter, but this enemy, this cancer, is tough. Could you talk to him?" And so we would meet every few weeks, and each meeting was more intense and powerful than the next. Whether we met here, poolside, in the garage, or at his bedside, we had an instant connection. We never finished a meeting without David insisting that we schedule the next one as soon as possible. And he shared his life story with me, and he held nothing back. We talked about his fears and his failures, his successes and his superpowers. We talked about how much he loved his family and how he cherished his friendships. How he went through so much in his life and he fought to get where he was. How he lived life to the absolute fullest because he knew how fortunate he was and how he wanted to share his gifts with those who loved him. And so many of us loved him. He swore like a sailor and laughed and cried like a kid at the beauty and unfairness of life and its twists and turns. At one point during our very first meeting, he showed me that video of you, Danny, and him dancing at her wedding with such joy and abandon. And then he told me that just a couple of days later, he got the news that he dreaded. I'm going to fight this, Rabbi, he told me, and I'm going to beat it. And I believed him like we all did. He loved life so much that he would do anything to cheat death from its cruel pronouncement. David Allen Freed was born on July 20th, 1962. And yesterday, of course, would have been his 60th birthday. He was born in Chicago. And his parents, Lawrence and Esther Freed, moved to Denver when he was 12. His dad had been a master electrician in Chicago, and they came to Colorado to have a better life. Lawrence got a chance to go into business in Denver as a partner and a manager in nursing homes, and it wasn't a great fit. And as David was 17, his parents divorced. His father moved to California, and immediately after, his mom left Denver to travel, leaving David alone as a senior in high school, Cherry Creek, unsupervised. He got into trouble. He survived. He found ways to make money, whether selling pots and pans or, as Scott said, anything he could sell out of the trunk of his car. And when he was 17 years old, he wound up in the juvenile detention center for 30 days. That experience shook him to the core. He vowed never to repeat his mistakes, and when he walked out of detention, the guards told him, "You'll be back. Everyone comes back." And he said, "I won't." David's life changed when he met an oil man named Brent Mickey. Brent took him under his wing. He taught him the business of buying and selling. And together they schlepped around the country into small towns buying oil and mineral rights. He was 18 years old, and they did well. And in his early 20s, he got a shot at real estate, and he was relentless in the pursuit of his goals. He wrote a letter every day to Dave Cronk at Pride West. He wanted to learn the business. He said he would do anything for him. And his buddy Steve Sessions introduced him to Dave. He said, "Let me work for you just 2 weeks. If I don't produce, you don't need to pay me." He produced. He became a retail sales agent for shops and mom and pop stores. And then he went to Cooper Investments, and then First Industrial, and then Pacifica Holding. And each place he went, he not only succeeded, he thrived. And in 2005, Fuller Real Estate, which became Cushman and Wakefield. And every Broker of the Year award that there was filled his walls, his storage closets, the boxes in his basements. He didn't have room for them all. And in 2020, he went on his own. We can talk about David's business for a long time, but that wasn't the most important thing to him. In 1986, he was at one of his mother's weddings. And he went there, and he met a beautiful young Israeli woman who was friends with whose sister was friends with Esther, who was invited to the wedding, and Molly came along. She was new to the U.S. She met David there, and he always tells the story about how at that time he had a serious girlfriend and he was 80 pounds heavier. And he met Molly across the room. He saw her and he said to himself, "I'm going to marry that girl." He broke up with his then girlfriend, lost 80 pounds, and a few months later, he walked into Majestic Cleaners, where Molly was then working at the time. He just showed up with no dry cleaning. He asked if he remembered her, and she said, yeah, but you look different. He said, well, actually, I don't need any clothes washed. I'm just here to see you, which made her nervous. And so she went and got her sister. She came out, who also worked at the cleaners, and David told them that he broke up with his former girlfriend. Looked to see if Molly was listening. She played it cool. And then he came a week later and he brought a friend, Brent Mickey, with him, and no dry cleaning. He wanted Brent to check her out. And he talked. And Molly was impressed with how he was taking care of his ex-girlfriend, even though they broke up. And she gave him some advice on how to deal with her. And then he came back with another friend, and no dry cleaning. And then she eventually figured out that he wasn't coming for the dry cleaning. He was there to see her. She told him that she was moving and needed furniture. And he said, oh, let me help you with that. I know a guy in the furniture business. He called him up and he started ordering her furniture. And she said, what are you doing? And he said, what's your budget? And she told him. And he told his friend a higher number than she told him. And she said, I can't afford that. He said, don't worry. That's what you'll pay. The next week, he showed up at the dry cleaners right when they were closing with a truck, 2 hours before they were closing, with a truck full of furniture and lamps and paintings and everything you could possibly need for an apartment. And she wasn't off work until 7. He said, no problem. Just give me a key to your house. I'll go set it up. Who is this guy? She gave him a key. He went to her house. She came home. He was still there. He walked, and when she walked into her bedroom, she saw this beautiful furniture all in place with pictures on the walls and lamps and rugs, artwork. He even took the sheets out of her closet and put it on her bed. He set up the room the way he wanted it in 2 hours. She said with trepidation, how can I thank you? Thinking he wanted. He said, just cook me dinner. She did. He came over, and mostly he talked about his ex-girlfriend at that dinner. And then weeks passed. He never called her. And then one Saturday night, she was at home making dinner. Her phone rings. It's David. What are you doing? I'm making dinner. I have an offer. He said, let me take you out to dinner. So they went out to TGI Fridays, big spender. And they made a connection. And Molly had known that Esther, who she was very fond of at the time, David's mother, was at a Greek restaurant. And so let's go visit her. And they had a great time at this Greek restaurant. And he took her home and he said, can I see you tomorrow night? And she said, yes. And they saw each other every night since then. They were married on September 17th, 1989. Danny, you came along 3 years later, and then Tyler in 97. David and Molly had an intense marriage. David loved her more than anything else in his life, even his kids. He would say that. She didn't like that. He said, fuck it. He told her that all the time. Even when they were in the middle of a fight, every conversation ended with, I love you, no matter how angry he was. He would do anything for his family. They had so much fun together. He loved life. He loved his wife. He loved his children. He loved entertaining, as we all know. He pulled out all the stops. And in Florida, every weekend, someone came to their house, did the same tours, even though he was getting chemotherapy. Didn't matter. They traveled around the world, to China, to New Zealand, to Australia, to Israel, to Costa Rica, to Europe. David did not like relaxing vacations. He was not a lay on the beach type of guy. He was always busy. There was always an agenda. A concert with David Fried was an event. I'll never forget the seats he showed me from that Stevie Wonder concert, which I'm sure you've all seen too. He sat in the front row. He took home the chair from the concert. He always wanted to buy you things, Molly. He's so happy that you're wearing your bling right now. As a father, we've heard so beautifully. Danny, you and Tyler had different relationships with your dad. You remember how close you were with him, how he came to all of your games, recitals, even though he was always on the phone, he was there. And when Tyler were born, Danny, you had a best friend built in, even though there was an age difference between the two of you. Danny, for you, your father was a role model to what it meant to be a good adult. He taught you how to relate to adults. He was the first person you would call, as we heard so beautifully, if he needed advice. And when Nate came into your life, it wasn't easy for David. It took him a while to warm up. But then, Nate, you and David connected on a higher plane. You got each other. You learned to love and care for and about one another on a deep and a spiritual level. And Tyler, oh God, your dad and I talked about you all the time. You always saw things differently. You were constantly at odds. He wanted nothing more than for you to know what was most important to him. And this last month, it was so perfect and so meaningful. Liz, your brother was more like a father figure to you than a brother. There was a big age difference between you. And when your dad and mom moved from California back to Colorado, you lived in David's basement until you can get a house here. He took care of you like another dad. You babysat. You were too young to babysit, but you babysat. And he would give you lessons about life. He saw you making some of the same mistakes that he made, and that hurt him, but he was there for you. He helped you in life, with college, with career, with contacts. He gave you the tough love he gave to everyone, but it was so full of love. David treated everyone with respect and as equals, no matter how much money they had. He didn't care. He saw people's souls, and that was what was important to him. He loved music. Oh, here it is. He loved cars. He loved parties. He loved his beautiful home, and he was meticulous in how he took care of it. He knew every plant, every rock, every chair. If you've had the experiences I have of sitting in those chairs while he told you how proud he was of those speakers that he rebuilt, and you had to sit exactly in the right place so you could hear every note of the music, or the piano that he had custom built that played orchestral arrangements of every one of his favorite songs. If one thing was out of place in his house, it drove him crazy. You know, in the world of music, there is one symphony which is quite different from all the rest. The conventional symphony has 3 or 4 or perhaps 5 movements, but there is a symphony that only has one movement. The reason is that the composer Franz Schubert never finished it. Schubert wrote the first movement, put it away in his drawer, and before he could finish it, he died. Hence its name, the Unfinished Symphony. And although Franz Schubert did not have the privilege of finishing his symphony, the entire world is richer in that it possesses this wonderful piece of music. For despite the fact that it breaks off before it's complete, it is nonetheless a masterpiece. An unfinished life is in many ways like an unfinished symphony. There is a feeling of deep regret that we have not been privileged to have seen that life lived to the fullest, and yet at the same time, we know that it's far better to have had the few years granted to us than to have had nothing at all. Their passing leaves us sad, the thought of the unfinished years, but grateful for the wonderful memories of a life that was nonetheless a masterpiece. David Fried lived more in his almost 60 years of life than all of us will ever experience, even if we live to be 120 like Moses. He cherished every breath he took, every deal he made, every friend he hugged, every foot rub he received. We are all better for having known and loved him. And so for a life that was cut short too soon, a life filled with love, a life filled with struggle and overcoming struggle, for a life that was well lived, we bid shalom to David Fried. Zichrono livracha. May his memory be for an eternal blessing. And let us all say amen. We're going to take just another few moments now of silent prayer.
May God bless and keep you always. May your wishes all come true. May you always do for others and let others do for you. May you build a ladder to the stars, climb on every rung. May you stay forever young.
May you grow up to be righteous. May you grow up to be true. May you always know the truth and see the light surrounding you. May you always be courageous, stand upright and be strong. May you stay forever young.
Forever young. Forever young. May you stay forever young. May your hands always be busy. May your feet always be swift. May you have a strong foundation when the winds of changes shift. May your heart always be joyful. May your song always be sung. May you stay forever young. Forever young. Forever young. May you stay
May the memory of David Fried endure among us as a blessing. In your own time, O God, when we too are called to enter eternity, may we leave this life secure in the faith that in your light we shall see light. In life and in death we cannot go where you are not, and where you are, hope endures. And so, sustained by this assurance, we invoke your name, Almighty God, as we rise as we are able for the El Maleh Rachamim.
Maleh Rachamim Shocher Mamromim Hamsei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina Im Kedoshim Uteorim Kezor Rakia Mazhirim Et Nishmat David ben Lawrence Vester Shalach Leolamo Barachamim Yostireu Beseter Kenafav Leolamim Beitzror HaChaim Et Nishmato Adonai Hu Nachalato Ve'yanuach B'shalom Al Mishkavo V'nomar Amen.
Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to David Allen Fried, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace, and let us all say amen. My friends, the family have asked that I let you know that they will be receiving condolence visitors today after interment until 4 p.m., and tomorrow on Shabbat from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m., and Sunday from 4 to 8 p.m. The family home, 6600 East Berry Avenue in Greenwood Village. There will be a Shiva service Sunday night at 5:30. Jim?
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude our service here at Temple Emmanuel. We'll ask you to please remain in your places at this time. We are going to escort the casket and the family to their cars. There are a number of pallbearers that you have been told that you're a pallbearer. We have split you up into 2 different groups. At the end of my announcement, I'm going to read the name of those that are going to assist us here. But quickly, as we make our way to the cemetery, you're invited to join us in an escorted procession. Those who will be in that procession will ask you to have your headlights on and your hazards. And we're going to use the southeast exit of the synagogue's parking lot. If you're parked on this west side of the synagogue, we'll ask you to start making your way to your car as quickly as possible and use Ellsworth to meet us right at the corner of Ellsworth and Grape. Those who are not going to the cemetery, if we can ask you to give way to those who are, if we can ask you to maybe use the northeast exit of this side synagogue parking lot, just so we can get to the cemetery as quickly as possible. Probably the most important, if I can ask you to please refrain from coming forward and trying to speak with the family, express your condolences. If you run into them in the hallway, in the restroom, please allow them to do what they need to do so they can get to the cemetery. If I can invite the following pallbearers forward: Neil Oberfeld, Gary Dragle, Gary Cohen, Bart Valls, Tim Gudem, Kurt Platt, Larry Karsh, Steve Leonard, Mark Cooper, Rob Donzinger, and Sean Marone.
Adonai ro'i lo echsar, binodeshe yarbitzeni al miminachot yinahaleni, nafshi yeshovev, yancheni b'ma'aglei tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begeit salmavet lo irara ki eta amadi, shiftecha mishantecha hema yanachamuni, ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged sorerati shanta vashemen roshi, kosi revaya. אך טוב וחסד יודפוני כל ימי חיי. ישבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. God is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside the still waters, and restores my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. Ach tov v'chesed yodefuni kol yimei chayai. V'shavti bevet Adonai lo'orech yamim. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever.
This concludes our service. Please make your way to your vehicles.